Assalamu alaikum.
عليكم السلام
السلام
ورحمة الله
ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Can you hear me?
السلام ورحمة الله.
Let's see.
Yes, Dr. Emmer, we can hear you.
Right. I believe you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can.
okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I cannot hear you. I assume you were. Ah. How about now? If somebody tries to speak. I just.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Yes, we
Okay,
can
good.
do this
Alhamdulillah.
because
can-
we are muting ourselves.
Yeah. I have multiple setups, and then sometimes the switch from one speaker to another. So that's the reason why sometimes I just want it. So once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much for coming and joining today. I'm really glad to see actually many participants, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen, because in the beginning I thought we were gonna only have 3 or 4, but now I can see more than that, and that's always a good thing. So let me just put a gallery. So there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's pretty good, alhamdulillah. So before we begin formally, let me just tell you that Boston Islamic Seminary has decided to live stream on Facebook this session starting 6:30. And the reason is that they want to make this session available not just through Zoom, but also on social media, so that anyone who is interested in this class may attend this first session and decide if they want to sign up or not. So this is a kind of a sampler introductory first session. And then from next week, only the students who are registered with Boston Islamic Seminary for this class will be able to attend. So I know that this is this may be a little different, and I myself have never live streamed a class on my class on any social media, so this is first for me too. But I think this is going to work well, inshallah ta'ala. So with that being said, here is, oh, Iman is here. I think I know you. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. It's good to see you.
Yeah, and I know Huda too, my 2 former students, mashallah, and a bunch of new students, and that's good, alhamdulillah. It's good to see you all. You can, I think it helps me if you're on camera, because it's much easier to speak to people when I can see your faces and I can see your interactions. But if for whatever reason you cannot be, I totally understand, and that's fine. But I think it's better, and it's just more natural if the camera is on. We do not have in-person class, so if it's online, if I'm speaking just to a screen with just letters and names and no faces, it is a little bit disorienting. So it's always good to see you. And so the reason I wanted the stream to begin at 6:30 on Facebook is to give us 25 minutes to get to know one another. My assumption is that those of you who have joined right now are the ones who, inshallah, have strong interest in this class and have already either registered or seriously considering registering for this class. And then anybody who joins later on Facebook and whatnot, they may be interested later, but I think their level of interest may be different than those of you who have just joined immediately. And I think for that reason, I would want to start this session with this. Let me see if, can you see this on the screen?
Yes, we
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Let me just figure this out. So Is it full screen now, or is it presenter's view?
Yes, full screen.
Full screen? Okay, good. So so this class is called Thinking About Islam, Modernity, Ideas, Institutions. And what do you know? I found this really nice picture with dates and some lanterns in the back. So my name is Ermin Sinanovic. I am, inshallah, your instructor for this semester. And my email is ermin@bostonislamicseminary.org. So if you have any questions about the class or anything else, the best way to reach me would be on this email. I use it specifically only for Boston Islamic Seminary, so I would know that if you're emailing me in this account, it's BIS related. I'll start by introducing myself, and then I'll ask you to introduce yourselves. As you know, one of the reasons for our creations is lita'arafu, so that you may know one another. And so let's start with that Quranic imperative, lita'arafu. My name is Ermin Sinanovic. I'm originally from Bosnia and Herzegovina, where I grew up. It was actually Yugoslavia at the time. I actually started my university studies just before the war in Bosnia broke out. And then I found myself eventually in Malaysia, where I studied at the International Islamic University, where I obtained 2 bachelor's degrees, one in Islamic studies with the specialization in the Quran and the Sunnah, and the other was in political science. And then I did an MA in Islamic civilization. After that, I came to the United States. That was more than 20 years ago. I completed my PhD in political science at Syracuse University. Since then, I've taught at the United States Naval Academy in Annapolis. I worked as director of research at the International Institute of Islamic Thought in Virginia. And for the past 5 years, I've been the executive director of the Center for Islam in the Contemporary World at Shenandoah University in Virginia. CICW, as we call it. Our center is an independent nonprofit organization, and we are affiliated with the university, but we're not of the university. And that's, kind of gives us best of both worlds. We have complete autonomy in what we do, but we also have a place at the university, so we have an attachment to an academic institution that also gives us academic credibility and also inroads into the academic world. All right, so with that basic introduction, I would like to go around the room and ask you all to introduce yourself briefly. Just tell me your name, where are you from, where are you currently, where do you live, what is your interest in this class, and try to keep that to about 2 minutes max. So I'll just go the way you appear on my screen. I'm going to start left to right. So Iman, you're the first.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I'm Iman. I'm in New Jersey, and I go to new school. I'm in a graduate program in New York. I study English and comparative literature, and what brought me to this course was I've in some of the political movements of the 20th century. And some of that concerns Muslim movements, but I haven't been able to really explore that aspect much. So, or like the idea of Islam in the world. So I'm hoping this course, I was looking forward to this course for that reason. And I might be auditing, not really registered.
Okay, auditing is fine. Yeah.
Right.
Good. Welcome, Iman. Huda.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm originally from Boston, but I currently live in Central Jersey. So Iman, we should link up, inshallah. I am an attorney. I have a background in history as well. And I also edit on the side. That's kind of like my fun way of doing work. My interest in this class, I've been trying to study Islamic studies for a long time, since undergrad in some form. I was interested in like history of Islamic civilization for a while, through academic, like secular academic spaces. I didn't have as much opportunity, but I try to do it on the side. This particular topic is interesting to me because I have grown up around movement ideology, Islamic revivalist movement ideologies through mass and other spaces. And I've always been interested in kind of finding a way to better articulate what that looks like in the 21st century in America. And so this is kind of my attempt to learn more about that in the past, at least. Inshallah.
Thank you, Huda. Welcome. Brother Muhammad Al-Ghazi.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Muhammad Al-Ghazi Mallouli. I am originally from Tunisia, and I live here in the United States since 2001. I live in Florida. My background mainly in IT. I'm an IT professional, and I worked in the Islamic field as executive director of IHC Center here in Orlando, but not anymore. I'm just interested in those subjects. I have a lot of questions, and I wish I can collaborate with you and contribute to find the right answers, like the mix between the Islamic values, the traditional values, and the modern life, and how to combine all of those.
Yeah. Thank you and welcome. I think in one of the following weeks, we're going to talk a bit about Al-Tahir ibn Ashur, one of the great contemporary Tunisian scholars. So
yes, I read his book, Tafsir Tahrir Tanwir.
Aywa.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. All right, Ahlan. Jahan Ahmed.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm originally from Lahore, Pakistan, the place where Maulana Abul Ala Maududi was based. And I'm doing my PhD at UC Santa Barbara, and I work on the intersection of Islamist movements and US foreign policy, particularly in the Cold War, when this kind of institutions were supported by US government, like IIT was established with US government help. Similarly, Islamic Center and Washington, DC, it had a lot of support from US government. So I'm working on that period of Cold War when US had an alliance with Islamist movements.
Okay, welcome, Jahan. So you said you see Santa Barbara, but you're not studying with Atif Ahmed, right?
Yeah, Atif, he's in religious studies. I'm in global American studies. So, but I keep talking with him.
Yeah, he's a great scholar. You should keep in touch with him since he's already there, you know.
Yes.
Good. MashaAllah, very good. Then we have Ozgu Akchakir.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Özgür. I'm originally from Turkey, and I live in Irvine, California right now. I'm a public policy analyst. Most recently, I work in the scientific institution of Turkey, and then we moved to Turkey because of my daughter's education in here. College education. And I am interested in this course because I want to learn about how the Islamic thinking, the Islam contribute to the solution of contemporary world problems. I think Islam has a lot to offer, so just want to know about more. Thank you.
Thank you and welcome. Your connection isn't great, so it was breaking up a little bit, but I think we got the basics. Inshallah, when you're in a situation to maybe get a better connection, we can at least hopefully you can hear us well. So welcome, Hoş geldiniz.
Yeah, I do. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, it is breaking up. So hopefully when you're in a better situation, we can share more with us. with connection. So the next
Yeah,
one is
I'm outside. Unfortunately, I'm outside. Sorry
okay.
about that.
No problem. Don't worry about it. As long as you can hear us. All right. So the next one is Manal.
Assalamu alaikum. Manal, originally from Egypt. I live in Portland, Oregon. I'm electrical engineer. I work for Intel, and I'm also a student at Mishka University working on my bachelor degree in Islamic education.
MashaAllah.
And mainly work in my community. I volunteer as a Quranic Arabic teacher. I also do run Yaqeen conviction circles and do some fiqh workshop. And I'm interested in this class mainly because I work a lot with the youth and young adult, high school and college age, and this always come up in the discussion with them. And even the concept of modernity, was completely new to me. I just learned about it a couple months ago in a class with Sheikh Sulaiman Hani, something with Al-Maghrib. But yeah, I'm really interested to learn more about this.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Welcome, Manal. Masood Wahidi.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Masood. I have a background in political science, the MA and the bachelor's levels. On the side, I'm usually really interested in Islamic studies, especially Hadith sciences and Islamic maxims. I'm really interested in this course because I see that it might be an interesting study on the segue or the connections between politics and Islam. Since I'm from Afghanistan, so I'm aware of Jamal Din al-Afghani. So I'd be interested to see some of the studies on how modernism came into being from an Islamic perspective.
Good, very good. Welcome. Huda al-Sharqawi.
Assalamu alaikum. Originally from Egypt, live in Boston. I am a Muslim chaplain. I work mostly with university students interested in studying Sharia in general and also helping the young people make sense of their faith and modernity. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
I also have a question. Are we gonna pray Maghrib on time or just because Maghrib comes in?
Yeah.
So
yeah, we're gonna talk about that later, but obviously we live in different time zones. So if it's time for prayer, you need to pray, you can just put yourself on mute and turn off camera and then go and pray, and maybe you just send in the chat I'm away or something like that for prayer. So we're gonna have to break also at about 7:05 because you can all sneak out and we can still continue class, but when it comes my time to pray, we'll have to stop the class for 10 minutes. So usually we're gonna do that. Then once I think we go into the winter time, so to say, I think the class is gonna start after Salat al-Maghrib. So we will have to break for Salat, but until then we will throughout the class. So we're gonna do that, inshallah. Very good. Huda, just one question. You said you work with university students. Do you work at a specific university or you're a chaplain?
I worked at MIT for a few years, but now I work with Mass Boston.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Omar Abdul Salam.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Assalamu alaikum.
My name is Omar. I am from Nigeria. I am a legal practitioner, but I currently work in an Islamic bank. I am attracted to this course specifically because I've always been interested in the intersection of Islam and modernity and politics generally. So also, you may not remember, but I'm something of an old student myself. I was at the inaugural summer program for CICW.
Thank you, Omar, and welcome back.
Yeah,
and finally we have Sulaiman.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry I don't have a camera. Probably I'll get one eventually, inshallah. So my name is Sliman Oufi, originally from Morocco.
Mhm.
I have been here for about 26 years. Came to the United States in 1997. And I live in northern Massachusetts. My background is in computer. I am a software engineer.
Mhm.
And I am eventually going to audit this class here.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what I'm getting myself into, but I like the subject. I like the title. I don't know what's behind it. Inshallah, I'm hoping that the class will help me better serve my community. I'm involved here with our local masjid here, and we have a lot of young people. And whatever I can give back to my community through this class will be my goal, inshallah.
Thank you, Suleiman, and welcome. So there was somebody else who joined in and then left immediately. So I don't know if it's the question of bad connection or something, but I think everyone has introduced themselves. Now, it's such a pleasure to meet you all, and inshallah, we'll get to know each other better in the coming weeks. If you stay in this class, that is to say, maybe you will decide after this first meeting, I don't want to do this, but if you do stay, then of course we'll get to know each other better. And I just wanted to ask you, since you come from so many different backgrounds and from different parts of the country and even from outside, how did you hear about this class?
I am on the mailing list of Boston Islamic
Okay.
Seminary, and I received an email about it.
Okay, so some of you heard on Facebook. How about others?
I was attending Mass Lighthouse in Florida
Mhm.
in end of August, and there Dr. Muhammad Abu Talib and some of Boston Seminary students, and he talked about, so I started to follow the institute.
Okay, very good. Anybody else? Email? Yeah.
Email for me as well. Emailing.
Good. Alhamdulillah, that's really good. I'm glad. I wasn't expecting that you'll be coming from like Portland and different places in California and Florida, and it's just such a nice thing to know that the word is out and that people from all over the country are joining this class. That is really good. Like I said, we are in different time zones, and I totally understand that different, especially prayer times come at different times for each one of us. So like I said, if during the class time you need to take 5-10 minutes to go and pray, you don't have to tell me, you don't have to announce it, you can just go and pray. You can just send a chat message, say I'm off to pray, or something like that, and that should be enough. So that if I call on you, for instance, and you're not responding, then I know that you're at prayer. So that's the only thing that I would need. Now, this is a certificate class, and being a certificate class, it is a graduate certificate, but it's not at the level of master's or PhD. For that reason, the requirements for those of you who are taking this class for credit are not that difficult, I would say. Now, I assume that most of you are probably going to audit this class. And if you are auditing the class, there are really two requirements that I have. One is that you attend, obviously. And the second, equally important, is that you do the readings. Now, I've tried to the best of my ability, I'm going to go through the syllabus, to the best of my ability to reduce the amount of reading. So you'll be getting anywhere between 15 to 50 pages on a weekly basis, which, it's not too much. I know that for most of us today, we have switched so much to the online and screen time and all of that, that reading books and articles is not as common as it used to be. But, if you want to learn and if you want to have a good, intelligent discussion about these issues, I think we need to prepare ourselves for the class each time. So take this as your, so to say, weekly obligation, Even if you're auditing, you say, okay, there's usually 1 or 2 readings each week, sometimes 1, sometimes 2. And like I said, between 15 and 50 pages. You know, some weeks there's going to be less readings, some weeks there's going to be more readings. But I don't think there's ever going to be more than 50. And when you think of it, you know, you have a week, so that's what, on average, you know, 5 to 7 pages a day. That's something I think anybody can read. You don't have to be an academician to read that, right? I tried to select the sources that are accessible, that are written in a way that would be understood by non-specialists. So I don't go into very specialized discussion. I may go into very specialized discussion, but I will not use very specialized readings, because I understand that most of you do not have a background in Islamic studies, and most of you are not, you know, maybe in a position to read very specialized readings in such ways. So the readings that I gave you are very informative and I think easy to understand. All of you, alhamdulillah, educated and have degrees and graduate degrees and so on. So it should be no problem for you to read all this material. I know that Huda had a question, so Huda, go ahead.
I was just going to ask about whether there's a book I can get, because I really don't like to read on screens, but it seems like you're going to be picking from different. So I'm just going to print it out. So that's fine.
Yeah, so we're not going to be using any single book, because I don't think there is one single book that covers the kind of thing that I want to teach in this class. I think through BIS, you should be gaining access to Moodle, which is the virtual platform. And if you haven't, you should email them and ask them to grant you access. So all of the readings are already posted on Moodle for the whole semester. So you can go week by week and you can download them. Now, if you don't want to read them on screen, you can print them out and then you can read on the paper, or you can read on your computer or your tablet. I don't recommend reading on phone because it's too small and it's not easy. But if you have a tablet or a larger screen, is okay. And obviously, a lot of people like to read from the paper, and I think there are even studies that show that reading on the paper it actually improves retention. That it's much better for us. I guess it's something to do with the way we approach these things, better than on screen. But even if you read on screen, that's fine, because you can also highlight and do all kinds of different things. Depends on what you are used to. So whatever works for you is fine by me. So I guess that in about a minute, we're going to go live on Facebook and at 6:30. So at that time, I'm going to start talking more about the syllabus schedule for this semester, what you can expect in this class. And then we can go after that immediately into actually probably we're going to take a break for Maghrib time. And then after the break, we're going to come back and delve immediately into the subject matter for this week, which is really introductory stuff. So I want to just give you an overview, and that's sort of going to create the expectations of what's going to come in the coming weeks. This is a 12-week course, so there's quite a bit of time. We have, is it 12? Yeah, I think it's 12 week. I believe so. So we have almost 3 months. We begin today and we end on December the 12th. So through a fall, all the way almost up to the winter, we're going to be together weekly here for 2 hours. And I'm sure once we start going deep into the subject, we're going to, inshallah, learn a lot, and we're going to be discussing different issues and whatnot. So assuming that the stream should be going soon, and I don't know if it is.
Whenever you're ready.
Excuse me?
Whenever you're ready. If you want, I can start now.
Okay, Hassan, we can start now. Just let me know when we're online so I can greet if anybody is watching online, and then we can move to the next gear, so to say.
Okay, 1 second.
This is a new experience for all of us. Just see.
Bismillah.
So we're live?
Yes.
Okay. Alhamdulillah, we're now live on Facebook. So if anybody is watching us on Facebook at any point, assalamu alaikum to you all. And welcome to Boston Islamic Seminary's certificate course on thinking about Islam, modernity, ideas, institutions. So I'm going to briefly introduce this class. But before that, I just want to mention a few expectations that I have of anyone that would like to continue this learning. So today, basically, this is a, what do you call it, sampler class or a free session, whatever the name for this is. And so we're also live streaming on Facebook, so anybody can get an idea what this class is about. And then if you decide to continue from next week, this is only going to be on Zoom and only for students who officially register with Boston Islamic Seminary. So today is a kind of introduction. So I'm going to start with basic expectations that I have of the students in this class. And then I'm going to say a few words about Boston Islamic Seminary. And this is just to allow everybody to, hopefully on Facebook, for more people to join. Can you see the screen? If you could just confirm. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I don't see all of you, so even if you're nodding, I need to hear it. Thank you. So, I mentioned this before. The expectations that I have of students, just like in any class that I teach, is that you complete the readings prior to class. Now, anyone who officially registers for this class will gain access to Moodle, M-U-U-D-L-E, which is the platform that Boston Islamic Seminary uses for certificate classes. And that's basically where you can find all the information about the course. The syllabus is going to be there. Weekly schedule is going to be there. All the assignments are going to be posted there for students who are taking this for credit. And importantly, all the readings will be posted there. Now, for the readings, you have to complete them prior to coming to class. So if reading is for today, posted for 26th, for instance, you should complete ideally the reading before you come to class today. So for next week's reading, which is I think October the 3rd, those readings you should complete before coming to class next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. So you have 1 week to do that. So that's the first expectation I have. The second expectation also is for you to attend regularly. And then once you attend and come to class prepared by completing your readings, you should participate. By that, I mean you should ask, you should give comments, you should question, you should debate, and you should participate in whatever way works for you, but keep in mind that we should all be respectful. So even if you disagree with me or with another classmate, that is all fine as long as we are respectful to one another. And then for students who are taking this course for credit, of course, it's important to complete all assignments on time. That is indicated on the syllabus, and then we can talk more about it, inshallah, in terms of deadlines and all of that. So any questions about this?
No.
We're good?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
Good. All right, so let me say a few things then about Boston Islamic Seminary. Some of you may be familiar with BIS, but many of you may not be. So the idea of Boston Islamic Seminary began in 2008. And then at first, Boston Islamic Seminary was established under Muslim American Society of Boston. but since 2015, it's been an independent organization. In 2018, BIS launched its first graduate certificate program. And then in 2020, alhamdulillah, BIS was approved by the Massachusetts Department of Higher Education to award the Master of Islamic Religious Leadership, MIRL, a full-time graduate program. This program has been going since 2021. The first cohort of students should inshallah be graduating, I think, next year. I have taught in the past in this program, and in coming January, I will be teaching another course at the master level for this particular program. The students are fabulous. The program is unique. I think it's the only program of its kind in the United States. And the BIS is now on its way, inshallah, to working toward accreditation, which we hope in the coming years it's also going to come. Among other things, BIS is an associate member of the Boston Theological Interreligious Consortium, BTIC, as well as other institutions and associations. It's a small but growing institution. If you look at the caliber of students and faculty, it's top-notch, really. And you can discount me, but if you look at from the academic dean, from the president to academic dean to everybody else, these are first-rate scholars, academicians with degrees from top institutions, and also committed to Muslim community and to Islamic work. So it's really a great institution. I've, alhamdulillah, been, I'm honored to have been associated with Boston Islamic Seminary for years now. And I have taught, I think, 5 or 6 times already for Boston Islamic Seminary, both certificate and MIRL courses. And it was always a great experience and continues to be. And it looks like this is going to be another such experience with, alhamdulillah, really, really good students that we have in class today and hopefully for the coming weeks. That being said, let me now go back to talking about this course. So what is this course about? It tries to answer several basic but very complex questions. These questions are, how did the Muslims encounter colonization and modernity? We know that in the past 2 to 3 centuries, the Muslims have increasingly got in touch with Western modernity, with the new ways of thinking, the post-Enlightenment thinking that was introduced in Europe. And this was done through 2 ways. One was through the interactions of Muslim lands with European countries. And they learned about the new developments in Europe, industrialization that was taking place, new philosophical ideas. But then also, as Europe grew stronger, it started expanding through colonization. It colonized much of the world, including most of the Muslim majority lands. And through that interaction, Muslims have also been introduced, you could say unwillingly, to modernity and to modern European ideas. And then the next question then, after this encounter, what are the new ideas and institutions that emerged during this interaction? What are the, how did these new ideas interact with the already existing ideas that existed in Muslim societies? What kind of new institutions emerged out of this interaction? These are all important questions. And then who were the significant scholars whose thoughts and ideas influenced the Muslims in the last 150 years or so? Out of this interaction, who were the Muslim voices that were speaking up for Muslims, that were trying to make sense of what's going on, that were writing books, teaching in schools and masajid and universities and in public sphere? Who are they? What are their ideas? And how did these ideas spread? And what kind of influence did they have in Muslim societies? So these are the 3 basic questions. And out of these, we're going to unpack many others. And we're going to go into different lines of inquiry that are going to help us understand how we came to where we are today. We know that the Muslim lands, just like the whole world, has experienced a lot of changes and shifts in the last few centuries. And we need to explain how that happened, what kind of ideas were introduced, and how did that affect Muslims, both in terms of their religious thought, but also in terms of social and political economic thought. How did that manifest itself in the everyday life of the Muslims? How did it impact the way they go about education, they go about economic enterprise, or politics, or different, or education, or different aspects of the society? All of this are the questions that we're going to try to entertain in this class. Now, I do understand that there are severe limitations, one of which is that, number one, we have students of different backgrounds. Some of you had studied these things previously. For some of you, this may be maybe the first time you're hearing many of these things. Number two, this is a certificate class. So it's not a master's level or a PhD. And so it's not as rigorous as it would be if this was a MA and PhD. With that being said, we're going to approach this subject matter with the exact same seriousness that we would if this were an MA or a PhD class. So we apply the same seriousness, but we do not have as much time or perhaps even depth as we would have in an MA or the PhD class. But that's also to say that we're still going to do our best to understand this with the time that had been allocated for this class. So if you don't mind, I'm going to now show you to walk you briefly through the syllabus for this class. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
And this is going to give you an idea of both the scope of this course, schedule, the topics, and the readings that we have. And once we cover that, then we're going to launch into the topic for today. So is that okay? Good.
Yes.
Let me just find. All right. So can you see this on your screens?
Yes, we do.
Okay. Is it clear? Do I need to increase the font size?
I think it's clear.
Okay,
Looks
thank you.
clear this way, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So once again, this is a thinking about Islam, modernity, ideas, institutions. As I said, my email is ermin@bostonislamicseminary.org. There's also my phone number there. That's only for emergencies, really. But for most other things, you can use the email here. So the course tries to answer these three basic questions that I already shared with you. And in a way, it is a semester-long joint deliberation on contemporary Islamic thought. The themes that we're going to cover are the historical context of Western modernity colonization and their impact on the Muslim community, the renewed interest in understanding the Quran and the Sunnah. So under the influence of colonization and modernity and the challenges that it presented to Muslim community, a lot of Muslims went back to the Muslim sources to try to understand what's going on and interpret what's going on in light of those sources. So there was a renewed understanding in understanding the Quran and Sunnah. We're also going to talk about the question of decline. Some people even are suspect about this. They say that, well, we cannot really talk about decline. Some others have talked about it and said that Muslim societies have for centuries been on the decline, and that has led to the weakening of Muslim societies, which made them colonizable. Malik bin Nabi used to talk about qabiliyatul istimar, that these societies developed the ability to be colonized, or as some people have translated this term, colonizability. They became colonizable. And because they became colonizable, they were colonized. But we'll also talk about renewal and reform, such as issues of tajdeed and islah, and what does that mean. Then we're also going to look at the emergence of new theories in tafsir, that is to say, the interpretation of the Quran, and fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence. All of these new ideas, challenges, encounters with modernity produced the interaction with Islamic sources that resulted in the emergence of some new theories and approaches in the Quranic studies, in Islamic jurisprudence, and in the understanding of the Sunnah. And we're going to talk in different parts of the course about all of this. We're also going to talk about something that we call Muslim modernism, which is an attempt to integrate the idea of modernity with Muslim tradition. And different attempts were done in different parts of the Muslim world. And we will look at some of these attempts and what were the outcomes of these attempts and how that Islamic modernism emerged. Some people also questioned the authority of the Sunnah, for instance. This isn't new. This has been throughout Muslim history, but in the 20th century especially, there's been a renewed, you could say, assault on the traditional understanding of the Sunnah, to the point that some people said, we don't need the Sunnah at all. We can just concentrate on the Quran. So we're going to look also at this, what led to these different understandings and how these Quran-centric or the Quran-only approaches emerge. We're also going to look at the Islamic revival in the 20th century, the reaction of the Muslims to modernity and to occupation and to colonization, and the way that they used Islamic vocabulary and Islamic tradition to try and restore Muslim societies and try to restore the role of Islam in the Muslim societies. And finally, we're going to look at some of the most recent developments, such as the influence of liberalism on contemporary Muslims. We're not going to spend too much time on this. This is going to come toward the end of the course, but I think that in answering many of the previous questions, what is going on currently in the Muslim community and around the world is hopefully going to become a little bit easier to understand and more intelligible to all of us after going through this course. Now, this also means that this course is probably going to generate a lot more questions as well. So there's going to be a lot of aha moments in class where you'll be like, oh, okay, now I understand why this happened, or why somebody said this and that, or why this person took that position. But that's going to lead to new questions, and that's fine, because we are in a never-ending pursuit of knowledge, right? So there's always going to be new questions, new doors are going to be opened, and that means new avenues for inquiry, and that's all good, and that's all part of growing and learning. Learning objectives and learning outcomes, you can read that in the syllabus. So for those of you who are taking this for credit, this is how the grade is going to be apportioned. 10% for attendance and participation, 20% for individual presentations in class, 20% for analytical paper, 20% for midterm exam, and 30% for final research paper. For those of you who are taking this as the audit, I'll have to check with the administration, but I think the only requirement that would be for you is readings and attendance. And I think you have to get like satisfactory on that, but I'll double check. This explains all the assignments. You can read that on the syllabus, and do let me know if you have any questions. Now, here's the detailed course outline. It says here readings will be available either at DTS2 database, which is a database that Boston Islamic Seminary subscribes to, but I think it's only available to full-time students. So for those of you who are not full-time students, you can find them on Moodle in PDF format. I've already posted, as I said, all readings for this semester on that platform. So today, the 26th of September, we're going to cover sort of the basic understandings of how Islamic thought developed in not just the 20th century, but from the 19th century until today, but focus is on the 20th century, because most of what we are discussing even today has developed and has its roots in the 20th century. Then next week, October the 3rd, we're going to talk about the emergence of modern Islamic thought. You have 2 readings for next week. They're both on Moodle. And if you haven't registered for class, once you do so, you will be able to access this and download them from there. Probably about 35 to 40 pages. So the first one is an article. The second one, actually, the whole book by Daniel Brown, Rethinking Traditions in Modern Islamic Thought, is available there. You only need to read chapter 2 for next week. So we're going to kind of set the historical stage for how modern Muslim thought emerged. What are some of the different trends in different parts of the Muslim world? What are some of the conditions in which such Islamic thought originated? And that is going to be kind of basic historical background that's going to set the stage for the rest of the semester. Then on October the 10th, we're going to talk about renewal and reform in Islamic thought. There's this short reading. This is probably the shortest reading that you're going to have throughout the semester. And I'm going to also do a presentation on this particular topic. And then we're going to talk about different aspects of interpreting different aspects of the Sharia and Islamic sources. So first, on October 17th, we're going to talk about modernization, development, and Islamic thought. What do we mean by modernization, secularization, and how Islamic renewal or tajdeed emerged during that period. Then the week after, we're going to talk about a turn in the epistemology and hermeneutics of usul al-fiqh. How did usul al-fiqh and fiqh in general, Islamic jurisprudence, how was it impacted by modern developments? And one of the things that you will see that's very interesting is that there is a greater emphasis on rationalization. So much so that we use it all the time. When people talk about why, for instance, Islam prohibits alcoholic drinks, or why certain teachings like that or like this, we try to use rationalization. Now, this is not something necessarily new, but the way to and the extent to which rationalization is employed in modern times has increased dramatically. Then we're going to turn to contemporary Islamic revival, social and political thought, and we're going to talk about that. And then we're going to turn to the Quran and the Sunnah and the way in which they were interpreted under these new conditions. I'm going to talk about Muhammad Abdu, who is his tafsir. We're going to talk about Tahir ibn Ashur and his tafsir as well. 2 different modern approaches that are also rooted in tradition. And then we're going to talk about the challenges to the Sunnah, the way in which the authority of the Prophet has been reconstituted or challenged in modern times by many people, whether it be through Am I hearing some background noise? So we're going to talk about the new ways of understanding the Sunnah, as well as new ways of defending the Sunnah. So the whole idea of Hujjiyah to Sunnah, or the authority of the Sunnah, has been brought to the fore of the 20th century Muslim interaction with both modernity and tradition. And there are different groups of Muslims have different approaches on how to deal with this, from those who would completely defend traditional approaches to the Sunnah, to those that are still accepting the traditional approaches, but maybe are open to some reform, to those that completely reject the authority of the Sunnah and say, we don't need the Sunnah, this is limited to the time of the Prophet ﷺ, or others are saying that we cannot authentically transmit the Sunnah and we cannot authentically know what comes from the Prophet or not, and the Quran is enough for us. And so there are many different modalities of this, and we're going to explore that in November, inshallah. And then finally, we're coming to Jonathan Brown's book, Misquoting Muhammad. We're only reading parts of that book in 2 weeks. And then we're going to see how all of these different challenges and approaches by different scholars of Islam, as well as those from outside the Muslim tradition, have challenged Muslim understandings of different things. So, you know, things such as polygamy, things such as, feminist thought, can women lead prayers, many other things that have emerged in the last decades, and the questions that people have about Islam, doubts that others have. You know, the people in the past used to write about الشبهات حول الإسلام, you know, the doubts about Islam or the doubts surrounding Islam and so on. And all of these things, I think, culminate in this book of Jonathan Brown, where he talks about different ways in which people approach these important questions, you know, whether it be, for instance, the Prophet ﷺ marriage to Aisha radiallahu anha, you know, something that you hear quite a lot. Every now and then, this controversy is going to pop up either by non-Muslims who are questioning Muslims, or by some Muslims who are trying to find either a new interpretation by saying that, you know, Aisha radiallahu anha wasn't as young as it was transmitted, she was much older, to others who are completely rejecting these stories and say they never happened, to others who say this is not even relevant. So there are so many different ways to approach this, and we'll see how methodologically Muslims employ these different methodologies to come to different conclusions about these things. And that points to quite remarkable diversity that exists in contemporary Islamic thought. I think if there is one thing that you will come away with in this class, is that Islamic thought as it exists today is remarkably diverse. And some people do not like that. They would like there to be one understanding. They say the Quran is very simple and clear, and you go back to the Quran and you see what it says, and that's it. And there is no point discussing diversity. And others are saying, well, we cannot escape 1400 years of history. People before us tried to approach the Quran and understand it. They tried to approach the Sunnah and understand it, and they created this wealth of opinions and methodologies in dealing with that heritage and tradition. And we today simply cannot avoid all of that. We have to be able to engage with that. So all of that and much more, inshallah, is going to be in this course. And each week we're going to unpack each of these topics. So with that general overview, I would like to ask if you have any questions or thoughts about this. Anybody? Does this sound as an interesting outline? Does it sound like something you would like to learn more about?
I'm very excited. Alhamdulillah.
Very good. Is there something missing, something that maybe you expected to be there, but it's not there? Is there something that you would like to learn more about, but wasn't maybe listed? Like I said, we are talking about, yeah, go ahead, Brother Muhammad.
We will see. We're gonna progress. I have a lot of questions and
Yes.
ideas, also some knowledge about the history, but
Yeah.
we'll see.
Yeah, okay, very good. Like I said, yeah, go ahead.
So are we going to talk about approaches to how to talk to young people about this? So I'm very interested in the teaching approach. So I'm learning for myself, but I also want to deliver those ideas. So that's something I would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, we may mention some of that, of how to relate these ideas to the community, but that's not the primary focus of this class. I think there are other classes at BIS that are much more oriented toward this question that you just asked. Even I think class that is also taught this semester at what's the name of the class? Does anybody remember? Have you looked at the schedule of classes? I think it is called Empowerment and Resilience for the Modern Muslim by Dr. Muhammad Abu Talib. I think that class is probably more geared toward what you just asked. So I think my approach is more kind of historical, intellectual, and then I think the other class is more about applied and more kind of related to community and so on. And so they sort of complement one another. So, but yeah, if at any point during our discussions in class, you find something that you think would be relevant for that type of question or that type of work, please bring it to our attention. And you can say, you know, I was just in discussion with the youth and they asked exactly about this. So how do we relate it to them? How do we make them understand this? You know, obviously we're talking about a huge field of study, a huge history, so many different geographical locations. You know, we're talking about the world that encompasses literally the whole world now. But, you know, even if you just go with traditional sort of what Shahab Ahmed called the Balkans to Bengals complex, or some people have called it, you know, some people say from Morocco to Indonesia. And I like what somebody wrote, from Mali to Bali, you know, from Mali to Bali. So that would be like the traditional Muslim world, all the way from West Africa, all the way down to Indonesia and so on. So we're talking about a huge geographical differences, historical and so on, and we can only capture a small portion of that in this class. So it's just that's just the way it is. But I hope that it's going to give you a good overview of what is in this class. So with that being said, I think that it's time for Maghrib over here where I am. So we're going to take a 10-minute break. So now it's 7:03. So let's make it 7:15 Eastern time. 7:15. We're going to be back at 7:15. And inshallah, then we're going to go into the topic for today, which is kind of give you a basic overview of Islamic thought in the 20th century. All right. So 12-minute break, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. We're back. Let's just see. Right, so is everybody back?
Walaikum salam.
Okay, I guess I'm waiting for more people to confirm that they're here.
Assalamualaikum, I'm here.
Okay, Suleiman is here, Huda is here, Mirna is here.
I'm here too.
Good, Manal.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam. Masood is here. Okay, alhamdulillah. You cannot hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Yes,
can.
we can.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can.
Because I got a message. Okay, it is good. All right, I know that some of you have to go for Maghrib prayer at different times, so just take your time to do that. And let us now go back to this presentation. I believe I already talked about this. Can you see this on your screens? Can somebody just confirm?
Yes, I can.
Okay, very good. So one big topic that we're going to discuss is modernity and modernization. Now, some of you have mentioned that this, you only heard about modernity very recently. And modernity is really this huge category that is both a time period and a philosophy. It's basically the time in post-Enlightenment Europe that after Europe went through Reformation and the emergence of new humanistic ideas and ideologies, the emergence of modern social sciences, the new forms of education, removal of or reducing the role of the church in society and religion in Europe, and so on. All of this produced what we call modernity and modernization, the ideas of, you could call it modern democracy and liberalism and capitalism and communism, and all of these modern ideologies that we know about, they are products of this Western modernity. So like I said, modernity is both a time period, last 350, 400 years, and a philosophy, a specific outlook on life that challenged the traditional forms that had been propagated by the church in Europe. This was also combined with the rise of industrialization in European societies that gave European societies, you could say, economic and military superiority over other societies, and they used that military superiority to then extend their influence around the world, to colonize and occupy many different lands. Pretty much most of the world was at one point occupied and colonized by European powers. And through that occupation and colonization, they also spread the ideas of Western modernity. So modernization is a process through which a society becomes modern. It's a process, the outcome of which is a modern society. And that includes issues such as urbanization. For instance, traditionally, most of the people lived in countrysides and villages. Very few people, comparatively speaking, lived in cities. But with modernity, more and more people started moving into cities. And, I think even the reading for today mentioned something that, for instance, in Egypt or in the Middle East as a whole, in the 19th century, only 8% of people lived in cities. And by the middle of the 20th century, almost half of the people lived in cities. So there's been a huge migration from villages and countryside to the cities, and that creates completely new forms of education, political and social organization. It creates new spaces, it creates new organization of life, but it also leads to intellectual rupture between the traditional ways in which people would gain knowledge about religion and other things and the ways in which now they gain. So just imagine if 200 years ago, a person lived in village and they learned from their imam in the local mosque, and that may be the only religious teacher they'll ever encounter, you know. So whatever the imam in the local mosque knows, that's pretty much all they're going to know about Islam, you know, and from their families and so on. But once they go and migrate to urban centers, to the cities, all of a sudden they can go to different mosques, they can learn from different imams, they can go to different schools and learn different types of learnings and trade and become members of different community organizations, professional associations, and all of that reorganizes life in new dramatic ways. And so in the past, when people would ask question what Islam says about X, about any given issue, right? People would go to their imam in the local mosque and ask them, you know, Imam, can you tell me about this issue or that issue? And that's how they would learn. But in modern society, they can go to multiple imams. They can read the newspapers. They can read the magazines. Then eventually they can listen to the radio, but then they can watch TV. Then they can watch the satellite TV, not only from their local TV program, but they can watch satellite TV from other countries. And then eventually the internet comes. And now you can pretty much hear millions of voices telling you what Islam says about X, Y, and Z. On every particular issue, you will find multiple voices telling you different things about what Islam says. And so while this has increased the amount of information and the ability to access knowledge, it's also increased the pressure on people and confusion. You know, in the past, if people went to their local imam, they usually didn't question their local imam. If local imam says, Islam says this and this about that particular issue, that's what people generally accepted. Nowadays, if they hear something and they don't like it, they'll go and search for it online, and they can ask somebody else. And they can go to this website, and they can go to this YouTube channel and that YouTube channel and TikTok and Twitter and what have you, Instagram. And on each of these platforms, they're going to get a different answer by different people. And that also creates a lot of confusion because people are not sure any longer what really Islam says about any given issue. So modernization has increased the ability of people to access information and to produce information. You know, in the past, only religious scholars spoke about Islam. Today, everybody with, you know, with a smartphone or with a camera, whatever you have, can speak about Islam. You know, they can use their two fingers or they can speak about it. They can create videos, and people are posting all kinds of things. So that increase of the number of voices, because of the developments of modernity, industrialization leading to industrial revolution, then eventually to information revolution and to the world that we inhabit today, has complicated many of the issues that in the past people took for granted or that people took as very simple. So I'll give you an example. You know, people used to talk about al-ma'lum min ad-din bil-darura, which means something that is known about religion by necessity. That's something that is kind of a priori knowledge about religion. You don't even have to prove it. It's kind of like axiomatic, right? So for instance, 100 years ago, if you ask people if homosexuality is forbidden in Islam, pretty much everybody is going to say yes. Nowadays, if you ask that same question, a lot of people are going to say, I'm not sure, maybe it's not, maybe it is. There is somebody who says that it's okay. There is somebody, you know. So what used to be al-ma'lum min ad-din bil-darura, you know, that pretty much everybody accepted for granted, and it was known just axiomatically, now becomes something that is not known by necessity any longer. People do not accept it as given. And so I'm using this because this is a current issue, right? But there are many, many other issues that we can also mention in this category. And I've heard even some prominent, I'm not going to name names, but some prominent American Muslim scholars who say that this issue cannot be put under category al-ma'lum min ad-din bi-darura any longer, because you cannot assume that by necessity many Muslims will say this is forbidden or this is not forbidden. There's a lot of things that people are going to dispute, and so this creates a lot of new questions and a lot of new ways to answer those questions. And so how did Muslims approach this? They approach through resistance and adaptation, and sometimes through rejection as well. So when they would encounter many of these new ideas that modernity brought to our attention, some people react by rejecting those ideas, say this is not something that Islam can accept. Others would say we need to resist this. We cannot allow this to penetrate Muslim communities. Others may say for some other issues, we need to adapt to this. We need to find a way how this can coexist with Islamic values. And there are many, many examples, you know. It sounds almost unbelievable today, you know, in the days of the smartphones. But, you know, there was a time not too long ago, I'm sure, Brother Muhammad, you remember this. There was a lot of debate among the Muslims, is taking pictures allowed or not? You know, alatu taslir, you know, with the photo camera. Is this allowed or not? Are Muslims allowed to take pictures? Because is this the kind of like the painting of human forms that is forbidden in Islam, for instance, they would ask. And some people would say, you know, it's permissible. Others would say it's permissible only for necessity. Like, for instance, taking your passport photo. For that, you will accept. Nowadays, nobody asks that question any longer, you know, because nowadays we have this thing, right? And on this thing, we take photos every day, many times. Nobody even thinks, is it permissible to take photos? Is it permissible? We even take photos of other people without asking their permission. You know, in the past, people used to ask, am I allowed to take photo? Is somebody allowed to take photo of me, for instance, to have it on my passport? Is this the haram type of pictorial representation? Nowadays, we don't even ask that question any longer, you know. And it wasn't too long ago, I'm talking about 30 years ago, this used to be a big debate in the Muslim community. Now it's not any longer. Everybody takes millions of pictures now, you know. Another thing is, you know, people say that when the microphones were first introduced, people were asking, are we allowed to use the microphones to broadcast the adhan in the masjid, the call to prayer? And people had different kind of ideas about this. Nowadays, we not only use microphones, we now broadcast it to the whole world. You know? And nobody even asks, is this permissible or not? So the categories have changed dramatically and so quickly. Much more so in the last few decades than before, but even before, sometimes the change was very abrupt and people didn't know how to react to it. So I'm just going back to the chat. So Ozgu is asking, how are we going to get the readings for the next week? I said this in the beginning, so I'm going to repeat. It's on Moodle. Moodle platform is the platform used by Boston Islamic Seminary. So you need to send an email to the administrator either to info@bostonislamicseminary.org or to students@bostonislamicseminary.org, and they should give you login access, provided you have registered for the class. If you haven't registered, you will not be able to access it, and you won't be able to attend the class next week. So from next week, only registered students are allowed to attend this class. Today, everybody is allowed, you know. We even broadcast it on Facebook, and we don't even ask if it's dries, right?
Right, thank you.
What's that? Oscar, did you say
Thank
something?
you.
Oh, you're welcome. And then
Thank you. Thank you.
And then Mirna asked, is the course covering postmodernism as well, or is it used interchangeably with modernism? I think toward the end, we're going to talk a little bit about postmodernism too, and how it destabilized some basic categories even more than modernism and modernity. So yes, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but not as a separate topic, because again, we don't have the time to go into that in details. But yeah, we're going to try and differentiate between modernity and postmodernity, or modernism and postmodernism. One question that is going to follow us throughout this course is the idea of who speaks for Islam and Muslims. I already talked a little bit about this. In the past, it used to be the ulama, you know, religious scholars. They would speak for Islam and Muslims. They would say authoritatively what Islam is about. You go to a sheikh, you go to a scholar, to an alim, to a mufassir, to a muhaddith, to a faqih, to a mufti, to a qadi, you know, and they're going to tell you, here is what Islam is about. Here is what Islam teaches about this. In modern times, this has changed, because in modern times, with modern means of education, people from different backgrounds started talking about Islam. Professionals, medical doctors, lay intellectuals, politicians, they all started speaking, assuming some kind of authority when it comes to Islam. And so this is a big change compared to previous times. And then when you come to the last 15 years or so, now pretty much everybody speaks for Islam. You know, with the introduction of social media, anybody with a Facebook or a Twitter or an Instagram or TikTok account or whatever else exists, I don't even know, can go and claim some authority to speak about Islam, you know, and people get followers. You know, some of the very prominent scholars may not even have social media, and some may not have that many followers, whereas others who may not be as prominent or as well educated may have millions and millions of followers, and they may be propagating ideas about Islam. Sometimes they may be well-rooted in knowledge, and sometimes they can be just, you know, sharing their opinion. And sometimes it's not clear when they're speaking from their opinion and when they're speaking really from the point of knowledge. And all of that increases this notion. I don't know, some of you may be a little young to remember, but others are perhaps not. But after 9/11 here in the United States, there was this big question: who speaks for Islam? Who speaks for Muslims? You know, the assumption being that, you know, in Christianity, especially in Catholic Christianity, you have a clear authority. The Pope speaks for Catholic Christianity, right? So, but there isn't such, and historically, there's been only a few times in Muslim history where there's been such voice in the Muslim community, where you could say that one person or a small group of people speak for Muslims or Islam. For most of Muslim history, we've always had very pluralistic setup of our society and community, that many different groups of people spoke on Islam, but they spoke from the position of authority and position of knowledge often. In today's time, what we have is a situation where people are speaking because they wish to speak. They don't always have the necessary background and attributes and learning and knowledge and the times that they put into studying Islam in order to be able and capable of speaking about it in an authoritative fashion. And then we have the question of tradition. Again, for many centuries, the way that knowledge was transmitted and that tradition was created was through chains of transmission, these isnads, where you would have scholars teaching their students, and the students would get a permission or an ijaza from their teachers to teach this particular subject. And then they would go into the teaching profession in the mosques usually, or madrasas, madaris, schools, and then others will learn from them. And that kind of generational transmission of knowledge from one generation to another continued in a very personal fashion for many centuries. But in modern times, with the rise of printing and books, people started learning about Islam by reading books. And that doesn't always, while this has increased the scope and access for people, so you don't need to live in a place, for instance, where there is a scholar, and you don't need to necessarily go and spend hours and hours in the masjid or in the madrasa studying with them, right? Which is how traditionally it used to be. Now you can pick up a book and read. But that also is not a very systematic way, because, you know, when you went to a madrasa or a school or to a sheikh, they would have a systematic way of exposing you to Islam. And they would teach you different subjects in different areas and connect one to another. Nowadays, people can pick random book and start reading. And all of a sudden, they may learn something about that particular area. It doesn't mean they know a lot of other things. And then we have the introduction of printing press, which started in Europe in 15th century. And then about 100 years later, it started spreading in Muslim societies. And there is a lot of this discussion and debate. Was it in the beginning, were the ulama prohibiting printing press or not? And there's a very complex answer to that question. There isn't yes or no answer to that question. But the thing is that with printing, the access of ordinary people to read books has increased. That's one area. The other area is that a lot of books that we have access to today were not available to even scholars just 200 or 300 years ago. What do I mean by that? There is there is this interesting book by Ahmed Shamsi from the University of Chicago on the introduction of printing presses in the Muslim world, and how the discovery of manuscripts led to printing of these books and manuscripts, and then eventually the widespread proliferation of these books in Muslim society in the way that previously wouldn't be attainable. So, you know, for instance, let's mention basic things other than the Mus'haf, other than the Quran. Sahih al-Bukhari or Sahih Muslim, which the Sunni Muslims at least consider to be the two most authoritative compilation of the Hadith, right? Today, you can just go online and Google Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari, and you're going to get it in PDF, and you can read it as a kind of like a printed book. Or there are websites where you can read all of the hadiths, and they have different chapters, you know, Bab, chapter on this and chapter on that, Kitab al-Iman, Bab on this, you know, chapter on this and chapter on that. And you can even go into search and look for certain words, and it's going to come out at you. In other words, you can access Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim and other books too, but let's just limit us to these two because they are considered to be most authoritative when it comes to hadith. This wasn't available necessarily to most pre-modern scholars. There wasn't, you couldn't just go to a bookstore and say, hey, give me a copy of Sahih al-Bukhari. I want to buy it. It wasn't something that was readily available. There were only a limited number of manuscripts around that were circulating. Some are in private possession, some are in possession of some scholars, but most of the people wouldn't have. Most of the pre-modern imams, teachers, even ulama, even the muftis, even the qadis, wouldn't necessarily have Sahih al-Bukhari as a book on their shelf. It's unheard of. This is a modern thing. And so now, all of a sudden, what does it mean when we can access all that heritage and tradition, but without the necessary know-how in terms of methodology of how to read these books? Because these books, most of them, were not written to be read. They were written either as compilation to serve as teaching manuals or resources for learned people in the community. They were not meant to be read by every, that saying Tom, Dick, and Harry, the English. So by every Ahmed, Ibrahim, and Sulaiman, they're not meant to be read by every Ahmed, Ibrahim, and Sulaiman. They're meant to be read by specialists, and they are mostly meant to be used in teaching as teaching tools. Now, all of a sudden, people can access these books and they can read them and they can say, hey, I read this hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari and it says this and this. That must mean that so and such is haram. Hold your horses. Hold your horses, because it doesn't really mean that. And we're going to come to that later when we talk. We're going to spend, I think, 2 weeks talking about the Sunnah, both in terms of its authoritative nature, hujjiyah to Sunnah, but also in terms of its understanding and how modern Muslims understand the Sunnah, how that understanding is different compared to how classically Muslims understood, and then also to look at the way of how some modern Muslims challenge the authority of the Sunnah. So the things get very complicated then, But take another book like Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun. Have you heard of Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun? One of the greatest books ever written in the history of humankind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Who said something? Somebody said, yeah, for sure. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
like you said, it is one of the.
Yeah. So Abdurrahman ibn Khaldun, one of the great minds of human history, died in year 1402, according to Common Era. So Ibn Khaldun wrote his book Al-Muqaddimah, Introduction to the Study of History, which is a fascinating and phenomenal book. But again, prior to the late 19th, early 20th century, very, very, very few people have ever laid their hands on Al-Muqaddimah by Ibn Khaldun, because it was in manuscript form and there were very few manuscripts circulating around. And so even though it's such a great book, Arnold Toynbee, the 20th century Oxford historian, one of the great historians of the 20th century in the West, he wrote about Ibn Khaldun's Muqaddimah. He said, this is the best book of its kind that has been written at any time in any place in human history. In other words, you could say that he is putting this book on the same level, if not higher, than Plato and Aristotle and so on. And everybody has heard about Plato and Aristotle, but not everybody has heard of Ibn Khaldun, right? And Ibn Khaldun, such a great mind with his, family background in Al-Andalus, usually ascribed to Tunisia, Brother Muhammad, right? He is considered to be from that area, then traveled to Egypt, and he was a judge in Cairo and moved to different places, and then wrote this phenomenal book that when you read it today, it's almost as if describing today's society in many ways, so much so that even the former US President Ronald Reagan, he used to cite Ibn Khaldun. And you can go to YouTube and just put in the search box Reagan Ibn Khaldun, and he talks about Ibn Khaldun. And what did he like about Ibn Khaldun? Ibn Khaldun said that at the beginning of the empires are very dynamic and they are very resourceful. And so the tax that they levy on people is relatively low, but their income is very high. As they become very developed and they develop bureaucracy and they develop new ways and institutions, they need money for those bureaucracies and institutions. So what do? They raise taxes, right? And so he said in the later stage of the empires, the taxes are high, but the revenue is low. And Ronald Reagan being Republican, he didn't like high taxes. So he said, you see, Ibn Khaldun is talking about these things, and what he's saying is very relevant for America today and so on. This was, 40 years ago, President Reagan, he said he studied that in college about Ibn Khaldun. And unfortunately, many Muslims have never read Ibn Khaldun. Many have never heard of Ibn Khaldun. And then fewer have read, and fewer have read the whole thing. And yet fewer probably understood what's in it. But the thing is, again, the point I'm making is that this particular book, as phenomenal as it is, as genius of Ibn Khaldun and so on, was not really well known to most pre-modern Muslims. They would hear about it. They would know that there was a person called Ibn Khaldun that he wrote Al-Muqaddimah, but they never had a chance to read it, because you couldn't just go into your local, a library and say, I would like to check out Ibn Khaldun's Al-Muqaddimah, because it didn't exist that way, right? And the same goes for even the works of Ibn Taymiyyah, for many of tafsirs like Al-Tabari and so on. Very, very few people, they would have maybe excerpts from these, and they would know excerpts from these works in other people's works who maybe have had access, and they have cited Al-Tabari or Ibn Khaldun or Ibn Taymiyyah, and maybe cited a few pages from their works, and then that would be transmitted in their books. But that's all that most people would ever have access to. In modern times, we have access to all of this. You can go to many of these websites online that have Arabic books in PDF and find all of these books, right? Very easily. You can find all the books of Hadith in PDF right now. Just Google it, just search for it. You can find Ibn Taymiyyah's works. You can find Al-A'mal al-Kamila, of whoever it is, the complete works of so-and-so. You can find Ibn Taymiyyah, you can find Ibn Khaldun, you can find all the tafasir, Al-Tabari, Al-Razi, Al-Zamakhshari, Al-Qurtubi, Al-Baqai, anybody you can think of, Muhammad Abduh in modern times, Ibn Ashur, Sayyid Qutb. You don't even need to go to a bookstore any longer. You just Google it, you'll find it in PDF, you can instantly read it. But this access doesn't necessarily lead to greater reading and understanding. That's debatable, right? And it can also give access to people who don't know how to use these books. To read a book is an art. And to read very complex books, very advanced books, you need to have some pre-knowledge. So if you read a book as you would read a novel, and you read Ibn Khaldun as if you're reading a novel, as you're reading Pride and Prejudice, or you're reading Ibn Taymiyyah as if you are reading, I don't know, whatever other book, the Oliver Twist or whatever it is, it's not the same. It's not the same. So again, does greater access equal or mean greater understanding? For some people, maybe, but for a lot of people, that doesn't necessarily mean so. And even though these books are accessible, very, very few people are actually using them, right? Anybody with a smartphone and internet connection can access any of these books nowadays. Very, very few people do. I know that because when I teach students and I ask them about the books, most of the time they haven't even heard about them, let alone read them, right? And we're talking about the students who are studying at universities. So how about your average Ahmed Ibrahim and Suleiman, right? They don't. So again, the question of tradition and knowledge and learning is a very important one, but that has also changed a lot. And then we have the issue of reason and revelation. there's because modernity places such great emphasis on reason. We are now in a modern age, scientific age, industrial age. We're using now reason and science to discover secrets of the universe. We do not appeal to metaphysics and revelation and revealed books and the Quran and the Sunnah and so on. The question was, and came from its own background, are reason and revelation compatible? Of course, this kind of question existed since the beginning of Islam. Different Muslim schools of thought, the Ash'ari and Maturidi and the Mu'tazila and the Shia, they all gave their own version of answer to this question. To what extent reason and revelation are compatible? When an unaided reason can discover things, when does it need revelation, and so on? Can you discover the basic truths of life and morality and so on just by using your reason, or do you need also the Quran, for instance, to help you and assist you in that? Or what is first? Is it revelation or reason? Different schools of thought in Islam historically gave different answers. Modernity, as I said earlier, came from European background. And in Europe, there was a clear clash between the authority of church and the newly emerging scientific revolution, right? And so we know all the stories about, Galileo and heliocentric system and so on and so forth, and Copernicus, and that in the minds of Europeans created this idea that religion and reason, revelation and reason, do not necessarily complement one another, but are often in contradistinction with one another. They contradict one another, right? And so scientific knowledge was elevated as, hierarchically speaking, to be the most accurate knowledge, whereas knowledge that comes from revelation or from tradition has been relegated to the lower ranks of knowledge, right? It doesn't give you the same kind of certainty as scientific experiment or mathematical equation or what have you. But then when it comes to Islam, there was a tension between reason and revelation also in Islamic tradition at some points, and different schools have different levels of tension between the two. But the problem wasn't as deep as it was in the medieval church, right? And so when the Europeans colonized the Muslim world, they approached Muslims and Islam the same way they approached the church, which is you have this religion that seems to be all-encompassing and that seems to be part of every aspect of your society. And let us tell you now that here we are with scientific knowledge that is superior to religious knowledge and so on and so forth. And Muslims had to then contend with that, right? That led to a lot of discussion in the Muslim community. And then on top of that, we also have, when we're talking about contemporary Muslims and contemporary Islam, we have different approaches to the study of Islam. We have faith-based approaches, such as, for instance, the one that we have here at Boston Islamic Seminary, right? In this class, we are using a faith-based approach to Islam. But when you go out to the academia, to regular universities, secular universities, if you want to call them that way, you have the academic study of Islam. And for them, the objective of the study of Islam is not the same as somebody who is studying Islam within the faith, where for you, maybe as a faith-based person, you are studying Islam in order to maybe get better understanding, get closer to God, get closer to the truth, discover the truth and distinguish it from falsehood, to perfect your practice of religion and so on. When you're talking about the academic study of Islam, none of that is really important, right? And so it's a different method. And so the influence of academic study of Islam on Muslims is really, really huge today. I'll give you a few examples. It may not penetrate every level of Muslim community and society, but it penetrates a lot of them. And especially among the academic, including the Muslim academics who are believing Muslims. There is a book, for instance, by a Chicago professor named Fred Donner, a book called Muhammad and the Believers, in which he makes an argument that the early Muslim community was an ecumenical community that was inclusive of Christians and Jews, and that there wasn't like a clearly demarcated Muslim community that came to exist later on, in distinction to Jews and Christians. But actually, the earliest followers of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ were called the believers, al-mu'minun, and that has included anybody who believed in one God. That is his argument. I have my problems with that thesis, and I have many arguments against it. But the thing is that when I talk, especially for the Muslims who are in academic study of Islam, I was surprised to find so many Muslims who have accepted this idea as if it was true. And there are many, many others. I can give you examples, and more will be coming. So when it comes to the study of Islam, in the past, people studied Islam in the mosques, in religious schools, madaris, and so on and so forth. Today, people study Islam in schools. In many Muslim countries, you study about Islam in elementary school and high school. And even though the environment is Muslim, it doesn't always mean that necessarily the approach is a faith-based approach, even though most of the time in Muslim communities it is. But then when you go to universities, especially secular universities, may have different understanding of how to approach Islam. And then especially in non-Muslim societies, and in majority non-Muslim societies and Western societies like in the United States where we live, you can go to any major university and college and take classes on Islam, right? But their approach and their methodology is very different from the traditional Muslim methodology. Their concerns are different, their objectives are different. And so all of these that I have mentioned earlier has created diversity, a tremendous diversity in which Muslims approach Islam. And that diversity has led to the emergence of various trends. So for instance, you have traditional approaches to Islam. You have reform-based approaches to Islam. You have the Salafis. You have the Quran-only approaches, people who reject the Sunnah. You have the feminist approaches to Islam. You have progressive liberal approaches to Islam today. So there are many, many different trends today, each of which has its own history and genealogy, objectives and methodologies that are different from one another. So, you know, in the past, you used to talk about, for instance, the Sunni and the Shia and the Khariji. And then when you're the Sunni, you talk about the Hanafi, the Maliki, the Shafi'i, and the Hanbali. Today, we're talking about completely different trends, not diversity within that jurisprudential methodology or the methodology of tafsir or the methodology of the Sunnah. Now we're talking about people who have social and political objectives, agenda, reformist agenda, liberal agenda, feminist agenda. The Salafis have their own, and so on and so forth. And each of them is a product of decades, and in some cases centuries, of interaction between tradition and modernity. And so this is kind of an overview of what we're going to be talking about in this class. And each week we're going to take a different topic. I know we're pretty much out of time. I wanted to leave a little time for a discussion, but if anybody has questions, I would like to hear. I'm going to chat here. Zahra said in the past, when people had a question, they would go and ask the closest imam. And we all know not all imams are open-minded and even corrupt in a way. I think this is also not a perfect source of influence for people who have controversial questions. I mean, yeah, definitely having more than one source is always good unless that one source is, you know, if you could live at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you only needed one source. You go to the Prophet alayhi wasallam, you ask him, you get your answer, and you know that's the authoritative answer. You know, after him, people would go, even the Sahaba, people would go to different Sahaba and ask them, you know, and they would say, well, Abu Bakr has this opinion, but Ali had that opinion, and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud had this opinion, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it is good to have access to more, but the question is, do we have the ability, knowledge, methodology to distinguish among these different opinions, you know? And that's where then more burden is on us than to be able to deal with multiple answers, right? I would agree with you that in general, it is good to have multiple sources, but we do have to be careful about the ability to distinguish among these sources and to know which one is more authoritative and which one is not. Huda asks, do we turn to books because they're easily accessible, or do we turn to books because imams and teachers are not easily accessible? I think it's both, right? Depends on the situation. And so, again, having books, I think, is a great thing. But I think it is also important to have some methodology or some anchor to which we can hold while we're reading those books, you know, because we're going to come, no matter what book you read, you're going to come to passages and sentences and chapters that you might say, I didn't really understand what this was about. So you still need to go and ask somebody to maybe explain it to you or to unpack it for you, you know. So I think both is good. Oscar said Muqaddimah is also a good book of sociology. Yeah, it is sociology, it is history, it is political sociology. It is also kind of a basic introduction to Islamic sciences and history. And yeah, it is a masterpiece, absolutely. Any other questions or comment? I know we're over time and I don't want to keep you longer because I know everybody is hard pressed for time and you have many other obligations with families and whatnot, but like I said, the best way to reach me is at my email, which is ermin@bostonislamicseminary.org. If you don't have access to Moodle, please contact Boston Islamic Seminary's administration. That would be at send email to info@bostonislamicseminary.org. Info, INFO, @bostonislamicseminary.org, and ask them how you can register for the course and how you can get access to Moodle, which is the platform on which you will find readings for the whole semester. You'll find there the syllabus, and then of course we can also communicate through Moodle. So with that being said, I think this is it. May Allah open the doors of understanding for us. May He facilitate and ease our learning in this class. I hope to see you all and more, inshallah, next week. If you have anybody you know that you think would be interested, please tell them about this class. You know, tell them I just attended the most amazing 2 hours in my life, and go and go and
thank you.
And invite them if you feel that this class could be for them. If you know other people in your community, in your family, please share this with them and have them register. So Jazakumullah khairan, and I will see you next Tuesday, insha'Allah ta'ala, at 6 o'clock. سبحانك اللهم بحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. See you inshallah next week.
Salam, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.